We're starting the show in Shanghai, where Paris's leading modern art gallery now has an offshoot. The Pompidou Centre has opened a branch in the Chinese megacity after setting up sites in Belgium and in Spain. President Emmanuel Macron was in China to inaugurate the building known as the Westbund Art Museum, which will host work from the permanent collection here in Paris, as well as showcasing new acquisitions. Well, France 24's reporters went to visit the galleries just before they opened. Here's more from Charles Pellegrin and Antoine Védéier.
This brand new building on the banks of the Huangpu River and the 25,000 square meters inside are Shanghai's Pompidou Center. Putting the finishing touches is all that is left to do before opening day. About 100 works from the Parisian Museum are on show here in 3 different galleries. Paintings by Picasso and Miro, but also by contemporary artists. A few hours before its inauguration, its chief curator Marcella Lista couldn't contain her excitement.
I find opening a museum in a new location quite exciting, moving collections, presenting them in a different light, in a different context. It means we can also freshen them up, look at them differently.
Over the course of the next 5 years, the Parisian institution will share its expertise and its name with its Chinese partner, the Westbund Museum. Shanghai authorities are banking on this prestige to bring people to an area that doesn't get many visitors.
I don't know the details yet because it's not open, but it's definitely going to attract a lot of people.
In our daily life, there are few occasions to look at art, but this museum will give us this opportunity. It's very exciting.
In order to reach its Chinese audience, concessions had to be made, and while the management refuses to describe it as censorship, authorities had to approve all the works.
I didn't really feel censored. Some works were put in question, others were replaced. But in the end, we got the result that we wanted. If it seemed like an exhibit lost its essence, I wouldn't present it.
The partnership will also mean extra revenue for the Pompidou Center, a boon for any cultural institution. But at the request of the Chinese side, that exact amount hasn't been disclosed.
Next, to a director who's a veteran of political cinema, from hard-hitting thrillers in the 1960s to sharp critiques of capitalism in the 21st century. Costa-Gavras has been making movies for more than 50 years. His latest film takes inspiration from the headlines in 2015, tackling the Greek debt crisis and the conflict between European diplomats and envoys from Athens as they tried to pull the Greek economy back from the brink. Costa-Gavras spoke to me about some of the key social questions that film explores. Costa-Gavras, thanks so much for speaking to us today.
Thank you.
Your recent film, The Adults in the Room, is based on a book by former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis, and it recounts a very turbulent time for Greece, 2015. Varoufakis is a divisive figure. He's an arrogant rebel for some people. He's a hero for others. Who do you think he is?
But Varoufakis, for me, in this particular case, which means the 5 months where I was Minister of Finance from Greece, he was a witness of what happened in Europe and the way Europe works during the meetings, because there was nothing written during this meeting. So I decided to tape all those things. So it's, for me, it's a witness, in a certain way, someone who resists, and which I like in generally in my movies and in the life also, people resisting.
Europe set up a rescue plan to save Greece.
The rescue plan was to save the German and French banks. Their colossal debt was transferred onto the Greek people. Our government wants dialogue.
Out of the question to renegotiate the MOU.
Le peuple grec a des obligations. This will lead to closure of your banks and to an exit from the Eurozone.
You are throwing us out of the Euro.
I didn't say that.
You implied that.
He's the one that should be kicked out. We need a Yannick set.
Now, during those negotiations in those conference rooms in Frankfurt and Brussels, in Athens, the government called for a referendum asking the people whether they agreed with the deal with Greece's creditors at the time. The people said no, that they'd essentially prefer to leave the euro than accept the Eurogroup's conditions, but their wishes weren't respected. What do you think that says about the relationship with democracy?
But the government did something very democratic. She asked to people if he would continue to accept what the Europeans were asking for, or just to stop it. So the people said no. And so the government tried to follow this decision of the people. But finally, Europe didn't change nothing. That was the big problem for Tsipras. And when they called him in Europe for a whole night, all the chief of state were after him, insisting, he ended up by accepting what he has refused before. That was a big drama. I mean, for that, I treated the movie as a tragedy, because it's part of the tragedy, this decision. Tsipras was completely legal, but ethically, it was not right. And I think in politics, you cannot have a politics without ethics. That's the problem. It's also what I'm trying to say with my movie.
Now, looking back at your career, the idea of resistance, or the resistant, has also been an important idea in all of your films. And if we look at a country like Chile, where the film Missing is set, the film for which you won an Oscar, people are now protesting in the streets in Chile against the neoliberal regime that was established during the Pinochet years. How do you see the legacy of those dictatorships in South America, in places like Chile?
South America, who started having a different situation since a few years ago, returns back to kind of dictatorship. It's not really military dictatorship. It's not anymore the guns and the tanks and it's the money, the banks. I called friends in Chile. They told me what was going on with several years. It was a catastrophe for poor people. They had salaries very low, like in Greece, and the tax going up, and no jobs. So people get down on the streets for a small problem. 1 penny more for the tickets to the metro. It was an explosion. And the amazing thing is that the president has to apologize, to say, okay, I stopped, I did something wrong. So now we see if he changed his mind, if he do something important economically to change the people's life, not just when say, I'm sorry, it was wrong what I did.
And you've been making political films now for 50 years, from Zed in 1969 to Adults in the Room today. Do you still think cinema has the same power, the same influence as at the beginning of your career?
No, I'm not saying political films. I'm making movies, I make films, that's all. And of course, the themes I'm trying to treat with my movies, it's about life, about people, about the power. Because the power is very important in our lives. There's power everywhere. And it's not only the political power, it's the power each one of us has. So I'm trying to speak about that. I'm trying to speak also about people resisting when the power is negative. It's what interests me. Okay, we can call that political or social, whatever, but for me are just movies. And it's the role of the cinema to speak about those things, as the cinema did from the very beginning. As the Greek tragedy started 2,500 years ago to speak about society, about people, what's happening to people. Okay, the theater and now the cinema has to continue, my feeling, in that direction.
Costa-Gavras, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Sign the MOU or ecstasy or...
You are wasting our time!
If you were me, would you sign this MOU?
Banks shut. No more money.
Well, as the Beatles say, money can't buy me love.
Next, Jane Fonda spent the night in jail after her 4th Friday in a row protesting against inaction on climate change. The 81-year-old actress and activist says she's prepared to get arrested every week if necessary and will be in Washington protesting until January. Naomi Lloyd has more.
Stepping out for the 4th Friday in a row, Jane Fonda, with friends and fellow activists, gathered on Capitol Hill in Washington to protest against inaction on climate change.
If you do not cease and desist, you will be arrested.
Undeterred, the veteran actress and activist continues marching. Fonda calls her protests Fire Drill Fridays, inspired by Swedish teen activist Greta Thunberg. Those taking part are invited to wear something red. Fonda believes climate change is a problem her generation needs to help solve.
Stay strong, stay courageous. Stand up for the rights of working people and the climate.
Jane Fonda is Hollywood royalty. The daughter of Henry Fonda, a Hollywood great, she's acted alongside some of the biggest names in the industry, like Robert Redford, and won 2 Oscars for Best Actress.
I'm so happy.
She's no stranger to political activism. Arrested, wrist in the air in support of the civil rights movement. During the Vietnam War, she travelled to the communist north to speak out against US military policy.
I pledge to resist!
A long-time fighter for women's rights and for the Palestinians, she's been speaking out about the climate crisis for more than a decade. In 2018, she spoke to France 24 at Cannes.
If climate change continues, I think there's a real question about whether we'll survive. And next to that, it's will we survive with a civil society?
This time, her 4th arrest led to a night in jail. The actress has vowed to continue protesting every Friday until January. On Saturday, December the 21st, she turns 82 and looks set to spend her birthday behind bars.
We're wrapping up the show with a preview of France's leading annual event for contemporary art and design from Africa. Also known as Africa is a showcase for dozens of art galleries from across the continent, as well as European dealers specialising in African art. Here's a look at some of the painting, photography and sculpture on display there this year. Well, for more arts and culture, do check out our website, and you can also keep up with Encore on Instagram too. There's more news coming up on France 24 just after this.